At the live desk, we are monitoring how the president's travel ban could shake up international sporting events, including some in the Bay Area. Next year, the South Bay hosts the World Cup. And of course, LA is the home of the 2028 Olympics. The president's executive order bans travelers from 12 countries. Now, the order does include specific exemptions for the World Cup and the Olympics. It has exemptions for athletes participating and their support staff and immediate family. But it doesn't say anything about international fans. Organizers for LA 28 say they're not concerned about losing revenue as a result.
It's very clear that the federal government understands that that's a environment that they will be accommodating and provide for. And so we have great confidence that will only continue. It has been the case to date, and it will certainly be the case going forward through the games.
All right, friends, welcome back to Dr. John Podcast. So, what just happened? The World Cup is practically on America's doorstep. And instead of a moment of global prestige, it's shaping up as a diplomatic catastrophe. Visa applications being shredded, international visitors terrified, a growing boycott movement, and allies questioning whether participating in an American-hosted tournament is morally tenable. Trump's own words and policies have lit the fuse. The crisis is unfolding on multiple fronts simultaneously.
The countdown to the 2026 FIFA World Cup continues. A new geopolitical wrinkle is raising questions about just how united the United States, Canada, and Mexico will be in jointly hosting the world's largest sporting event. Reporter Kimberly Mitchell has more details.
As the U.S. prepares to co-host the 2026 FIFA World Cup, President Donald Trump's new travel restrictions are drawing criticism from football fans and international officials. The ban targets citizens from several countries, including some
each one compounding the others in a cascading avalanche of diplomatic and logistical failure. Trump's draconian travel bans, which have expanded to cover more than a dozen nations, have thrown a wrecking ball into the fundamental promise that every World Cup host must make, that qualified teams and their supporters will be allowed entry. FIFA's rules are unambiguous on this point. Host nations guarantee access. Without that guarantee, the tournament's legitimacy collapses.
teams are already qualified for the tournament. While exemptions will be made for players and officials, supporters from affected nations could struggle to secure visas, potentially missing the chance to cheer their teams on the U.S. soil. The White House says a dedicated task force will ensure a safe and successful tournament, but with visa delays and diplomatic tensions mounting, questions remain about how inclusive this World Cup will really be. Kimberly Mitchell, Tobago Updates, Television News.
But Trump has not only refused to provide that guarantee, he has actively, publicly, almost gleefully declared that he doesn't care whether one of the qualified nations even participates. Iran, a nation that fought its way through the Asian qualifiers and earned its place on merit, is at war with the United States. Operation Epic Fury rages on. The Strait of Hormuz remains a flashpoint. And when asked about the Iranian national team's right to compete in a tournament, the United States is legally and ethically bound to facilitate.
Trump White House, live picture there at the White House. Well, we are hearing from the president in a video right now, and he is, as the Associated Press is characterizing this, resurrecting the travel ban policy from his first term. Here in the president's own words, let's listen.
The recent terror attack in Boulder, Colorado, has underscored the extreme dangers posed to our country by the entry of foreign nationals who are not properly vetted, as well as those who come here as temporary visitors and overstay their visas. We don't want them. In the 21st century, we've seen one terror attack after another carried out by foreign visa overstayers from dangerous places all over the world. And thanks to Biden's open door policies, today there are millions and millions of these illegals who should not be in our country.
Trump's response wasn't diplomatic nuance or careful hedging. It was dismissive indifference. He doesn't care. Let that sink in. The president of the host nation openly declared his apathy toward the participation of a qualified team, a statement that doesn't just violate the spirit of international sporting cooperation, but drives a tank through the contractual and moral obligations America assumed when it accepted the honor of co-hosting.
In my first term, my powerful travel restrictions were one of our most successful policies, and they were a key part of preventing major foreign terror attacks on American soil. We will not let what happened in Europe happen to America. That's why on my first day back in office, I directed the Secretary of State to perform a security review of high-risk regions and make recommendations for where restrictions should be imposed. Among the national security threats their analysis considered are the large-scale presence of terrorists, failure to cooperate on visa security, inability to verify travelers' identities, inadequate record-keeping of criminal histories, and persistently high rates of illegal visa overstays, and other things. Very simply, we cannot have open migration from any country where we cannot safely and reliably vet and screen those who seek to enter the United States.
The visa catastrophe extends far beyond the headlines about Iran. The travel ban architecture that Trump has constructed with meticulous cruelty includes nations across the Middle East, Africa, and the Caribbean. Haiti finds itself on the prohibited list, a designation rooted in Trump's well-documented contempt for nations he's described in terms too vulgar and racist to dignify. Several African nations with passionate football cultures and diaspora communities eager to attend matches are similarly blocked or facing insurmountable bureaucratic hurdles. And then there's the quiet disaster unfolding at American consulates worldwide, where visa processing times have stretched into absurdity. Colombia stands as the most jaw-dropping example. If you're a Colombian fan dreaming of watching your national team compete on American grass, you needed to apply for your visa more than a year in advance. Think about the cruelty of that timeline. The World Cup draw, the event where teams learn their opponents and their host cities, happens far too late for fans to know where they need to travel. Yet the visa system demands they apply before they could possibly know where they're going. It's a Kafkaesque trap, a system designed not to facilitate legitimate travel but to strangle it with red tape and impossible deadlines. The result is that millions of fans who would otherwise flood American cities with their passion, their currency, and their goodwill are being quietly, bureaucratically turned away before they can ever book a flight. The fear factor is equally devastating. Trump's administration has unleashed immigration and customs enforcement with a ferocity and a disregard for basic human decency that has transformed the agency into something resembling a domestic paramilitary force. Raids at hospitals where immigrants seek emergency care, arrests at schools where parents drop off their children, courthouse stakeouts that trap people seeking legal protection. This is the landscape of terror that has been cultivated, and now the World Cup is arriving in the middle of it. Imagine you're a soccer fan from Senegal or Egypt or Ecuador. You've saved for years for this trip. You've navigated the visa gauntlet, you've purchased tickets and booked hotels. And then you see the news footage. You see the reports of ICE agents sweeping through public gatherings. You hear the stories of people with valid papers being detained for hours, separated from their families, subjected to degrading treatment because they looked like they might be undocumented. Would you still get on that plane? Would you bring your children into an environment where the immigration enforcement apparatus has been given a license to hunt? Many are deciding the answer is no. The fear isn't hypothetical. It's deterring real ticket holders, real fans, real human beings who are choosing their safety and dignity over a football match. That's a devastating indictment of the atmosphere Trump has created, and it's going to be visible in every half-empty stadium, every section of unsold seats, every broadcast shot that reveals a crowd far smaller than a World Cup deserves. The economic dimension transforms this from a reputational problem into a material disaster for American communities. World Cup tickets were already eye-wateringly expensive, a reflection of FIFA's relentless monetization and the basic economics of global demand. But Trump's policies have layered additional costs onto every aspect of the experience. The Iran war has sent fuel prices soaring, which means flights are more expensive, which means the decision to travel becomes even harder for working-class and middle-class fans from abroad. Hotels near host cities, already pricing at a premium for the tournament, have become even more costly as inflation ripples through the economy. Restaurants, transportation, merchandise, every dollar a visiting fan would spend is now a dollar they're less likely to have available. And every dollar they don't spend is a dollar that won't flow into the American businesses and workers who were promised a World Cup windfall. Cities that invested millions in infrastructure improvements, in stadium upgrades, in marketing campaigns to attract visitors, are staring down the barrel of catastrophe catastrophic underperformance. Hotel owners who expanded capacity, restaurant groups that hired additional staff, vendors who stocked up on inventory, all of them are facing the real possibility that the anticipated surge of international visitors will be a trickle instead of a flood. The economic body blow will be measured in lost revenue, in jobs that evaporate, in small businesses that took calculated risks based on promises their own government has now sabotaged. And then came Sepp Blatter, the disgraced former FIFA president banned from football administration for corruption, still carries enough name recognition and residual influence that his words land with force. In January, Blatter did something remarkable. He called for a boycott of the very tournament his former organization is staging. His reasoning was blunt: Trump's policies, the travel bans, the border wall obsession, the immigration enforcement crackdown, the wars, all of it represents values so antithetical to international sport that participating would be an endorsement of bigotry and aggression. The irony of Sepp Blatter, of all people, positioning himself as a moral arbiter is not lost on anyone who followed FIFA's corruption scandals, but irony doesn't diminish impact. Blatter's call resonated because it gave permission. If the former president of FIFA, however tarnished, is saying teams should stay home, then politicians and football federations in other countries can adopt that position without being dismissed as radical outliers. The floodgates opened. Members of parliament in the United Kingdom began discussing whether their nation, even though its constituent teams failed to qualify, should formally discourage fans from attending and support a broader diplomatic boycott. Germany, a footballing colossus, saw serious political figures raise the question of whether Die Mannschaft should travel to a country whose leadership so flagrantly violates the principles of inclusion and respect that international sport claims to embody. Grassroots petitions in the Netherlands gathered thousands of signatures from ordinary fans demanding their federation refuse to legitimize Trump's America with their presence. This is no longer a fringe conversation. It's a mainstream political discourse happening in allied capitals, in parliamentary chambers, in the sports pages of newspapers that normally wouldn't touch geopolitical controversy. Gianni Infantino, FIFA's current president, finds himself trapped in a vice of his own making. He has cultivated a conspicuously warm relationship with Trump, appearing alongside him at events, offering public praise, treating the American president as a valued partner in growing the game. That strategy may have seemed clever when it was about accessing the lucrative American market and leveraging presidential influence for FIFA's institutional goals. But now, with Trump actively undermining the tournament Infantino is supposed to deliver, that coziness looks like complicity. Soccer fans around the world, a passionate and increasingly organized global constituency, have noticed. Protests are mounting at FIFA events. Media questions are becoming sharper, more confrontational. The narrative is crystallizing. Infantino is either Trump's useful idiot, lending legitimacy to a regime that despises everything international sport represents, or he's a cynical opportunist who cares more about personal access to power than about the integrity of the tournament he oversees. Infantino's public responses have been weak tea, vague platitudes about sport transcending politics, about football bringing people together. But platitudes don't process visas. They don't stop ICE raids. They don't persuade boycotting nations to reconsider. They don't fill empty seats. The gap between Infantino's rhetoric and the reality Trump is creating grows wider by the day, and sooner rather than later, Infantino will be forced to either break with Trump publicly or own the disaster as a fully invested partner in its creation. The timeline is what transforms this from a manageable problem into an inescapable catastrophe. Diplomacy typically operates on timescales measured in months or years. Problems like visa processing backlogs, travel ban exemptions, security guarantees for visiting teams, these are things that competent governments address years before a tournament begins. The World Cup was awarded to the United bid long ago. The planning infrastructure existed. The frameworks for solving these problems were available. But Trump's administration has not only failed to solve them, it has actively made them worse at every turn, right up to the precipice of the event itself. The tournament is weeks away. Teams need to be finalizing their travel logistics now. Fans need their visas now. Boycotting nations need reasons to reverse their decisions now. And instead of providing those reasons, instead of offering exemptions, accelerating processing, providing guarantees of safe passage, Trump is doubling down. He's reiterating the travel bans. He's refusing to carve out exceptions for the World Cup. He's saying publicly and repeatedly that he doesn't care if qualified teams can't play. Each statement hardens the positions of nations considering boycotts. Each new report of ICE enforcement excess reinforces the fear that keeps fans away. Each day without action makes the logistical recovery harder, until soon it will be mathematically impossible. The window for avoiding disaster is closing, and Trump appears to be nailing it shut from the inside. The global mockery that awaits is going to be breathtaking in its intensity. Every international media outlet, from the BBC to Al Jazeera, from European sports networks to Asian news channels, will have correspondents on the ground. They'll be filing stories not just about the matches, but about the atmosphere, about the host nation, about the experience of traveling to Trump's America. And what will they find? They'll find stadiums with swaths of empty seats, the visual that no broadcaster can hide and no spin can neutralize. They'll find the conspicuous absence of entire national fan bases, the colorful, passionate supporters who make the World Cup a spectacle of global humanity. They'll find teams that qualified on merit but couldn't participate because the host president decided their nationality made them unwelcome. They'll find local businesses that were promised a bonanza and got a ghost town. They'll find fans who did make the journey swapping stories of degrading visa interviews, of terrifying encounters with immigration officials, of the constant background anxiety of ICE presence. The narrative will write itself. America, under this leadership, is incapable of welcoming the world. It is hostile. It is incompetent. It is embarrassing. That narrative will be broadcast to billions of people. It will shape perceptions of the United States for a generation, and it will all be entirely, provably, and publicly the consequence of choices Donald Trump made. The political fallout for Republicans is already being mapped by Democratic strategists who can scarcely believe the gift they're being handed. The midterm elections are looming just months after the tournament concludes. The timing is devastating. When voters go to the polls, the memories of the World Cup disaster will be fresh. Empty stadiums will feature in campaign advertisements. International headlines mocking American incompetence will be quoted in debate questions. Economic losses in host cities will be documented by local journalists and weaponized by challengers. Every Republican incumbent will be forced to answer a simple question. Did you support the president whose policies caused this? There's no safe answer. Support Trump and you own the disaster. Criticize him and you invite a primary challenge from his vengeful base. The trap is elegant and inescapable, and Trump walked his entire party right into it because he couldn't set aside his xenophobic obsessions even to protect them from electoral harm. The damage to America's relationship with its co-hosts is a secondary crisis that will outlast the tournament itself. Canada and Mexico entered this partnership with the expectation of a collaborative, mutually beneficial celebration of North American cooperation. Instead, they're watching their southern neighbor torch the whole enterprise. Mexican officials are fielding furious inquiries from their own constituents, fans who are being told they need visas processed through a broken system, who are seeing reports of ICE enforcement that make them fear for their safety on American soil, who are wondering why their government agreed to co-host with a country that treats their people as potential criminals. Canadian diplomats, accustomed to being seen as America's closest and most reasonable partner, are struggling to answer for their association with policies their own government finds abhorrent. The diplomatic fallout will be significant, adding tension to relationships that were already strained by trade disputes and border policies. America's neighbors are learning, in the most public way possible, that partnership with Trump's America means exposure to his chaos without any ability to control it. The long-term reputational damage to America's standing as a host for major international events could be permanent. FIFA has a long memory. Other international sporting federations watch closely. The International Olympic Committee, which has already had complicated experiences with American bids, will note every empty seat and every boycotting nation. Future World Cups, future Olympics, future global summits and championships, all of them will involve backroom conversations where someone raises the question, can we trust the Americans to welcome everyone? If the answer has been poisoned by this administration's performance, the consequences will ripple forward for decades, costing American cities billions in lost economic activity and costing American citizens the intangible benefits of hosting the world's great gatherings. The damage is not easily undone because trust, once shattered, is not easily rebuilt. The specific cruelty of the Iran situation deserves deeper examination because it encapsulates everything that makes this crisis so infuriating and so unnecessary. Iran's national team earned its place through competitive qualification. The players, the coaches, the support staff, they are not the Iranian government. They are not responsible for the geopolitical tensions that led to Operation Epic Fury. They are athletes who devoted their lives to reaching the pinnacle of their sport. Under the rules that govern international football, they have an absolute right to compete. Trump's war on Iran is a separate matter, one that can be debated on its own strategic and moral merits. But the World Cup has always, however imperfectly, attempted to carve out space for sport to exist alongside political conflict. The United States has competed in tournaments hosted by nations with whom we have deep disagreements. Russian athletes have competed in American-hosted events despite Cold War tensions. The principle of separating sport from politics is fragile, imperfect, and absolutely essential to the functioning of international competition. Trump's casual dismissal of Iran's right to play, his statement that he doesn't care, isn't just rude. It's an assault on that principle, and it signals to every nation that America's commitments as a host are worthless if the president wakes up in a bad mood about your country. The visa processing catastrophe in non-banned countries like Colombia illustrates that the problem isn't just the explicit travel bans, it's the systematic degradation of consular services under an administration that views every foreign visitor as a potential threat rather than a potential customer. The 500-day wait time in Colombia isn't a natural disaster. It isn't an unavoidable bureaucratic reality. It's a choice. It's the result of deliberate understaffing, of policies that prioritize suspicion over service, of an ideological hostility to the very concept of welcoming foreigners. The same pattern repeats at American consulates around the world, creating a global barrier that functions as a de facto travel ban even for nations not officially on any list. The World Cup is simply the most visible victim of this broader dysfunction, the event where the accumulated weight of 1,000 visa denials and delays becomes impossible to ignore because suddenly the world is watching and the seats are visibly empty. The ice fear factor is the most emotionally resonant dimension because it touches on primal human concerns about safety and dignity. You can argue about visa policy in the abstract. You can debate the merits of travel bans as counterterrorism tools. But when a family from Ghana or Morocco or anywhere else watches footage of American immigration agents dragging people out of hospitals, when they read accounts of legal permanent residents being detained for hours because their paperwork had a minor discrepancy, when they internalize the message that their skin color or accent or religion might make them a target regardless of their legal status, no amount of tourism marketing can overcome that fear. The decision to attend a World Cup is fundamentally a decision about whether you feel welcome, whether you believe you and your family will be safe and respected. Trump's administration has spent years broadcasting the opposite message as loudly as possible. The World Cup is simply the moment that message's consequences become visible to the entire planet. The boycott movement, now endorsed by figures ranging from disgraced former FIFA presidents to sitting parliamentarians in allied nations, has developed a momentum that will be difficult to reverse. Boycotts operate on a logic of collective action. Individual nations may hesitate to be the first to withdraw, fearing isolation or retaliation. But once the threshold is crossed, once a critical mass of nations signals their refusal to participate, the political cost of participation rises dramatically. No football federation wants to be seen as the organization that legitimized Trump's policies by showing up while others stayed away in protest. The dynamic creates a cascade effect where each announcement of a potential boycott increases the pressure on remaining nations to join. Trump has done nothing to arrest this momentum, nothing to offer wavering nations a face-saving reason to attend, nothing to demonstrate that their concerns are heard or their values respected. His posture of dismissive indifference is precisely calibrated to accelerate the very boycott he claims not to care about. The empty stadium visuals will be devastating in a way that text-based scandals can never match. Written reports about visa processing problems or diplomatic tensions can be ignored or spun, but a high-definition broadcast of a World Cup match beamed to billions of screens showing vast sections of unfilled seats cannot be unseen. The image will circulate endlessly. It will become a meme, a symbol, a shorthand for American decline under Trump. Every photograph will be captioned with variations on the same theme. The world stayed home because America under this president is not worth visiting. That visual legacy will endure long after the political news cycle moves on. It will be the first thing people recall when they think about the 2026 World Cup, perhaps the only thing, and it will be Trump's face, Trump's policies, Trump's statements that are inextricably linked to that image. The economic consequences for American communities should not be abstracted. Behind every empty hotel room is a housekeeper who loses a shift. Behind every unfilled restaurant reservation is a server whose tips evaporate and a cook whose hours get cut. Behind every unsold merchandise unit is a small business owner who took a calculated risk and is now staring at inventory they can't move. These are real people, real Americans, who were promised that hosting the World Cup would be a windfall for their communities. They made investments, they hired staff, they extended credit, and they are now watching their president, through a combination of malice and incompetence, ensure that the promised visitors never arrive. The anger these people feel is not partisan, it's personal and financial, and it has a way of showing up at the ballot box. The timing relative to the midterms cannot be overstated. American voters have short memories for abstract policy debates, but they remember concrete failures that happened recently and affected them personally. The World Cup will conclude, and then the campaign season will intensify, and the images and economic data from the tournament will be fresh and available. Democratic campaigns will have a field day, and they won't need to exaggerate or manufacture outrage. They'll simply need to show the footage, quote the international press, tally the economic losses, and ask whether voters want more years of a leadership that cannot even host a party without turning it into a disaster. Trump's broader political vulnerability makes this crisis especially dangerous for him. He's already underwater on multiple fronts. The Iran war, with its mounting casualties and economic disruptions, declining approval ratings that show even some of his base supporters growing weary of the constant chaos, a MAGA movement that's fracturing as various factions compete for influence and purity. He needed the World Cup to be a triumph, a showcase of American greatness that would provide a narrative of competence and global respect heading into a difficult election cycle. Instead, it's shaping up to be the exact opposite, a globally televised demonstration of everything his critics have been saying about his leadership. The dissonance is jarring, and voters notice jarring dissonance. Infantino's complicity will be a story that haunts FIFA for years. The organization has spent decades trying to rebuild its reputation after the corruption scandals that brought down Blatter and his associates, positioning FIFA as a principled advocate for human rights, for inclusivity, for the beautiful game's ability to transcend borders and bridge divides. Infantino's embrace of Trump, his willingness to overlook everything that Trump's policies represent, his public statements of admiration for a president who is now actively destroying a World Cup, all of it undermines FIFA's carefully constructed narrative. Soccer fans, who are among the most passionate and organized constituencies on Earth, will not forget. They will demand accountability. They will protest at future tournaments. They will pressure sponsors. Infantino may survive politically, but his legacy will be permanently tarnished, and FIFA's credibility as a moral actor will take a blow from which it may never fully recover. The Iran exclusion is a particularly virulent poison pill because it ties the World Cup failure directly to the war that is already the biggest drag on Trump's presidency. Voters who are furious about gas prices, about the human cost of the conflict, about the sense of endless and pointless war, will now have another reason to associate the Iran conflict with negative outcomes. It's not just that the war is costly and bloody, it's now also the reason that the World Cup is a diminished and embarrassing spectacle. The connection is intuitive and powerful, and it will be made relentlessly by Trump's opponents. The diplomatic chill with Mexico and Canada will have practical consequences beyond the tournament. Trade negotiations, security cooperation, environmental agreements, all the dense web of relationships that bind North America together will be strained. The leaders of these nations have domestic audiences to answer to, and those audiences are watching their governments be embarrassed by association with Trump's conduct. The incentive to cooperate with Washington on other priorities diminishes when Washington has demonstrated such profound disregard for the partnership's reputation and success. The pathway out of this crisis is narrow and getting narrower. It would require a dramatic and unlikely reversal. Immediate exemptions to travel bans for World Cup participants participants and fans. Emergency visa processing measures that clear the backlogs in weeks rather than years. Public guarantees, backed by binding commitments, that ICE will not conduct enforcement operations at or near World Cup events. A diplomatic charm offensive aimed at wavering nations, offering concrete reassurances and perhaps financial incentives to participate. And a presidential apology, or at least a presidential walkback of the statement that he doesn't care if Iran plays. None of this is likely. None of it is consistent with Trump's political brand, which is built on never apologizing and never backing down. So the crisis will continue to worsen, and the world will watch it worsen, and the moment of maximum embarrassment will arrive on schedule. The World Cup was supposed to be America's victory lap, a demonstration that the nation could still do big things, could still welcome the world with open arms, could still inspire awe and admiration through its organizational excellence and its confident, inclusive spirit. Instead, it's becoming a cautionary tale about what happens when a country lets its worst instincts guide its interactions with the global community. The empty seats, the missing teams, the boycotting nations, the international ridicule, all of it will be Trump's legacy to the beautiful game. And the world will be watching, not with admiration, but with something closer to pity or contempt or grim satisfaction that the bully is finally being exposed on the largest possible stage. This is the harvest of years of cruelty and incompetence, and the reaping has only just begun.